Chapter 11, Noun and Adjectives, the construct state, and then we'll look at absolute and construct state special cases. In Chapter 10, we looked at nouns and adjectives in the absolute state and the boxes that went with the absolute state. In this chapter, we're going to look at the boxes that go with what's called the construct state. And of course, in the absolute state, a word is absolute or independent. It can stand absolutely or independently. In the construct state, however, it's a little different. A word is constructed onto another noun or another word, and or connected to another word. So this would be like in Greek. If you've had Greek, in the genitive constructions that you have in Greek, how they can put words together with a genitive construction, in Hebrew has the same type of construction. And so, for instance, you have something like davar, and then Elohim. Now, this means the Word of God. And this word here, the first word, reading, of course, from right to left, the first word, and of course you could have other words here before it, these words would be in the construct. They're constructed onto a word that's always absolute. And so the last word in what we call a construct package is in the absolute, so this is in the absolute, and all words that's connected to this absolute word would be constructed onto it. And again, you normally translate it with like word of God, something like that. And so we want to keep that in mind. Now, when we have a construct package, if it has a makef, that raised dash that connects them, then the word in the construct state completely surrenders its accent to the following word. But if a word does not have a makef, that word in the construct state may have an accent, but normally it has a conjunctive accent in Hebrew, meaning it conjoins or just goes right with the with the word in the absolute. And or sometimes you can have a very light disjunctive accent, very light. But practically speaking, a construct package without the makef still only has one main accent. And again, we're talking about practically speaking. And so as we look at the boxes for these, for the construct state, we're always going to have a makef. And the purpose of that is that we're emphasizing that that accent has shifted from the word in the construct over to the word in the absolute. And that'll be very important as we work words in the construct state. Okay. So now if you look at section 3, we'll look at the masculine singular construct. And what we have for that is a box in which the last letter of the noun or adjective will be placed. And then we're just going to simply have a makef. And the purpose of that makef, again, is to signal to you that practically speaking, that accent has been shifted to the following word. And so this word in the construct, again, we'll consider it to be without accent. Okay. So, with that in mind, we'll look at the word davar. And of course, davar looks like this. And again, we're going to follow the same 3 steps as we did in Chapter 10. Namely, the first thing we want to do is restore the protovowels. And so, anytime we have kametz, we make them patach, just like you see here. In the second step, we're going to add the box. And this time the box is going to be a masculine singular construct box, which is simply a box with a makef. And again, the purpose of that is to emphasize that this word is now without accent. It's been shifted to the word in the absolute. So now we can just divide the syllables here, and we're ready to crunch the rules. We have not divided these syllables correctly. We need to stop there. Okay. So, when we divide the syllables, remember there is an implicit silent schwa here. Okay. Had I divided it where I did, the problem is this is no syllable at all. There's no vowel here, so we can't put the division here. What we want to do is just have one division right there. And so again, you've got to remember there is a silent schwa sort of implied here. And so now we're ready. This syllable is closed unaccented. Hebrew requires a short vowel. This is rule number 3. And therefore, the patach there is going to be saved. It's not going to go away. But the patach under the dalet is in the originally open pro-pretonic syllable. And that short vowel is going to be reduced to a vocal schwa, and might as well get rid of this line too. It's gone also, and so this would be the answer, davar. That would be the answer. All right. Now let's go down to the 5th example, chacham. And again, this is very similar to the one we just did, the davar, but it's got a guttural in the first position, and so we want to take note of that. First step again is to restore the proto-vowels, which will be patachs. The next step is to attach the box with the makef. And then the next step would be to work the rules of syllables. Again, this syllable here would be closed unaccented, the accent being shifted forward. And so Hebrew requires, according to Rule 3, a short vowel, so we'll keep the patach. But again, this patach is now in the originally open pro-pretonic position, and we will reduce that to a vocal schwa, but not a simple vocal schwa. We're going to have to make it a composite schwa, and there you can see that. Okay, so again, I want to point out at the end of section 3 the 3 steps that you need to follow. They're the very same steps that you really learned in the last chapter. Now in section 4, we're looking at masculine plural construct, and here the box is going to look like this. You're going to have the box for the last letter. You're going to have the seire yod with the makef. And this time again we'll look at davar. And so here's the word davar. Our first step always is restoring the proto-vowels. And so the kametzes become patachs, as you see here. The next step is to attach the box. And the box for the masculine plural construct is going to look like this. And so again, the accent's been shifted. And so when we divide the syllables, the division of syllables will look like this. And so now we're ready to crunch the rules. And so there's nothing you can do here. First of all, it's a box. You never mess with the box. But it's a historic long seire yod, so nothing can ever happen to that. But now this syllable here under the bait is in the originally open pro-pretonic position, and therefore the original patach will be reduced to a vocal schwa. The daled's in the same situation. It's in the originally open pro-pretonic position. It also will be reduced to a vocal schwa. And now we have the classic schwa fight position, 2 vocal schwas beginning a word. And so we're going to have a schwa fight, and when we do that, as you know, the first one's going to become a hirik because this is a non-guttural letter. If this were a guttural letter, if it were like a chet or something like that, we would get patach. The gutturals have that preference for patach, but being the daled, it will simply get the hirik. And so again, if you look at number 5, the chacham, you'll see it's chachme. You get that patach under the guttural, again because the guttural has that preference for patach. Okay, then if you look at section 5, we now look at the feminine singular construct. The feminine singular construct. And for this one, we will look at navi. We'll go back to navi again. And the first thing we want to do is restore the proto-vowel. So we take the kametz and put down a patach. Now, the box for the feminine singular construct is a box like this, and then a patach under the box, a tav with, again, another makef. So this is the box that you need. Again, the accent has been shifted to the following word, the makef. That's why I stress that you put a makef there. Again, in biblical Hebrew, you're not always going to see the makef here, but for the purposes of learning it's best right now that you always see a makef there, so that'll remind you the accent's been shifted forward. Okay, well, if we divide the syllables would be divided something like this. Again, this is a box. You don't mess with the box, but it's closed and accented, so you wouldn't touch it anyway. They'd keep the short vowel. The bait here is in an originally open pro-pretonic position, but it does not have a short vowel. It has a historic long vowel. You don't touch it. And then the noon is in the originally open pro-pretonic position with a short vowel, so you know that's where the schwa is going to come in. And we'll get rid of that line for the syllables. And so this is your answer for this one. Now let's go down and do number 4. We have chacham again. And we would have, of course, the kametzes, but we're going to go ahead and restore them to patachs as our first step. Our second step is the box. And so here's the box for this feminine singular construct. And we can go ahead and, again, put syllable divisions for what we're doing. And so here we go. This final syllable cannot be touched. It's a box, but also it's closed and accented, so it's not going anywhere. And then these two syllables here are going to be in the originally open pro-pretonic, so both will get reduced. And now we're ready for, obviously, a schwa fight. And this time we are going to get the patach, because, again, you have the guttural. Gutturals have that preference for patach. And so there you see the answer, chachmat. And again, we would turn this final mem around, too, in the box. Let's turn that around like that. And so there's your final answer. Okay, and again, you can see the explanation of these forms. Footnote 3 is a very important footnote that I do want you to look at. Of course, I want you to look at all the footnotes, but that one in particular. The box that you're seeing here, this final patach tav, was the original feminine ending of words. So back in Proto-Hebrew, so take the word like for horse, let's say, the original feminine ending would have probably looked something like this. But for some reason, when the accent became strong here at the end, Hebrew stopped pronouncing this final T. And when they did that, what they did is they lengthened that that patach to kametz by compensation for the fact that the T was no longer being pronounced. And so, again, in an unpointed text, that's why they stuck the hay on, the phony hay as we call it. I mean, this is a real hay if it has a mapik in it. When it doesn't have a mapik in it at the end of a word, and it's like this, it's phony every time. And here it's written with a hay in order to have you read a kametz here in an unpointed text. But the original ending, again, was this. And apparently what caused it to change was this accent. The heavy accent, for some reason, they would not pronounce the T. And again, once they stopped doing that, they had to lengthen the vowel to compensate, and then you got the H. But when you do a construct state, the T will actually stay because the accent's not there. The accent has been shifted to the following word. And because it doesn't have an accent, the T was continued to be pronounced, and it didn't go away, and there needed to be no compensation or anything. And so this is the real ending. You can think of a word like this. We'd call it Hebert in English, but if you were to take it into French or something, again, what they would do is they wouldn't pronounce this T. And for not pronouncing that T, they're going to lengthen the E. And then that H at the beginning, they're even going to really not pronounce that one either, and they're going to lengthen this, and they're going to say a bear, well, we'd say Hebert. But a bear, you see. And so the same phenomenon happens in other languages too, where they don't pronounce the end of a word or a certain letter at the end of a word, and they lengthen the vowel by compensation. And so, again, this is something that's not just to Hebrew, but this is to many languages. And so you want to keep that in mind. Okay, well, again, we talked about in the last chapter that many of your feminine singular absolute nouns end in this accented comma hey. And so the word, for instance, prophetess, which I give you here, would be something like nevi'ah, like this. And of course, you've got the schwa here because the accent's here. The original patach under the noon is in the originally open propretonic position. It gets reduced. But now what we want to do is we want to put this in the feminine singular construct. Now again, never put a hey in the box. Don't do this. If you do that, you're wrong every time. You've got to get rid of one box in order to put the other box on, as it were. And so the first step here, again, is get rid of the accented comma hey. That is step number one. Then step number two, restore the protoform, which of course would be this. Then put the box on for your feminine singular construct. Then crunch the rules. And nothing's going to happen here. This would be closed unaccented. Nothing's going to happen here. You got a historic long vowel. And it's always the short vowel in an open propretonic syllable that's going to get it. And it gets it all right. And so you get the vocal schwa, nevi'at. Nevi'at. Okay, so just remember that. Now we want to look at the feminine plural construct. The feminine plural construct, that's section 6 of chapter 11. And the box is one that should look somewhat familiar to you. Of course, this would be the absolute. For the construct, we're going to basically do the same thing except put a makef, which means get rid of the accent. And that's going to be it. So that's not very difficult. And so I'll do one example of this. We'll do yashar. And again, we'll take these, we'll get rid of the kamets and go to patach. That's our first step here. The second step would be the box for the feminine plural construct, which looks like that. The accent's been shifted to the last word, or the next word. And so now what we want to do is we simply want to crunch the rules. Both of these are in the originally open propretonic position. You're going to get the double schwa, and you know what that means. We're going to get a schwa fight, and we're going to go to a hirik, because again, this letter is not a guttural. Otherwise, we would get a patach, like you would see in example 4 that I give you there. And again, remember that if you have a noun or an adjective, whatever, that has that accented comma hey on it, you've got to remove the accented comma hey in order to put the feminine plural construct box on in order to do that. And you can see that in the example down below. Okay, now we want to talk about the dual construct. And again, this is not bad because the dual construct looks just like the masculine plural construct, and so there's no real difference. And so again, there's not a whole lot more to learn on this, except that as you can see in the section 8, I give you the boxes, and you can see that the masculine plural construct and the dual plural construct, or the dual construct, they're both the same. The boxes are the same. And again, if we had a word like yad, I'll just go ahead and restore the proto-vowel. That's the first step. And then you put the box on like this. And the patach would now be in for the third step, would be in the originally open propretonic position. It gets reduced to a vocal schwa, and there you go. Okay, now in section 9, we have the syntax of a construct package. In a construct package, only the last word, the word in the absolute, can have the article. You can never put the article on the first word, or put it this way, on any word in the construct state, you cannot have the article. The article can only be on the word in the absolute state. And if the word in the absolute state is definite, then the whole package should be regarded as definite. So, for instance, I give you the example, the var, word of, the man, the word of the man. And the article here will make the whole package definite, the word of the man. You would never put the article here. That's an absolute no-no. You can't do that. So don't ever put the article there. That just won't work. Now, if you look at the second part there of section 9, I talk about the word in the absolute state. Again, that's the last word in the package. Often functions like an adjective to modify the word in the construct state. And so this is like one noun modifying another. This is done because Hebrew usually doesn't use adjectives to modify nouns. Normally they use nouns to modify nouns. And so you can see that number 2, you get place of holiness, which means the holy place. Scales of righteousness, righteous scales. Man of God, godly man. And so frequently when you see a construct package, what you are getting is a sort of like an adjective noun relationship that you would get in English. And so you want to keep that in mind. In section 10, we have absolute construct state special cases. These forms are very common forms, but yet they're irregular. And they're very common words like house and I. And then if you look on the if you look under the irregular and special nouns in section 2, you get words like son, man, woman. Those words in foreign languages are often irregular. Language tends to conform rare words. But if a word is real common, like father, mother, brother, so forth, you don't change those words. You don't mess with the word mama in a language. I don't care how much pressure is brought to bear upon it, it's not going to happen. And so in almost all languages, those very common words has to be practically memorized because they're almost always irregular in some way. Now, if you notice in section 10, number 1, I talk about contraction. There's 2 basic contractions in Hebrew, and that is, as I show you here, I. Accented I, and again this is for a letter to set in here, this box, becomes A like this. So a lot of times patach yod will contract to a sere yod, especially when it loses its accent. When losing accent in particular, this I becomes A in Hebrew. And this is a very common contraction in Hebrew. And so you can see that in the word ayin. There's the word ayin, which is where the letter ayin gets its name, by the way. Ayin, and notice it's got an accent there, but when you put it in construct and the accent is shifted off of it, this I actually becomes A, like this. Now that little hirik that I showed you, that I had written here, this hirik was later added. The contraction occurs probably before that was ever added. So this I simply goes to A like this. And so that's one important construct in Hebrew. The other one I give you in the footnote below, and that is when you have a situation, ow, a patach and a vav. When those two come together, a lot of times they will become O like this. So owl goes to O, or av goes to O, whatever. And so again, this is another contraction that is common in Hebrew that we will see later on. Okay, when you look at number 2, you look at those irregular and special nouns. You'll need to read the details on this. But again, you're going to have to pretty well memorize these words in the absolute singular, in the construct singular, the absolute plural, and the construct plural. And I give you some analysis of these. Sometimes I'm pretty sure, and sometimes I'm not pretty sure about the analysis. They're difficult forms, but go ahead and read that. And what I would suggest you do is memorize these forms. That's probably the best way to get these down. So that's it for Chapter 11. You need to read the chapter, of course, and do the questions and drills.